Hello and welcome. I'm Renee Brilhante with Flying Proof, and today's video is all about should we go LLC or incorporated or should we not? And some of the pros and cons with that. We're also going to go over different accountants and lawyers to look for, how to create and how to get your EIN if you plan to get an Incorp or an LLC. We're going to use Florida as an example for that. And then we're going to talk about some resources as well. And throughout it, I'll kind of give some tidbits here and there. I do want to add, I am not a lawyer, I am not an accountant. So this video is not detailed. This is to be like that person like me when I went, okay, I want to get an airplane. Should I put it under an LLC or incorporated or not? And this is kind of a beginning guiding step to then find yourself to better people to talk to more details, because every state and every person's story and what your use is for that airplane is different. So I can't sit here and answer that for everybody, unfortunately. Well, all right, let's get started in this video. So what are your pros and cons? Pro to getting an Incorp or an LLC. First off, I want to mention, I keep saying LLC or incorporated. It's very state dependent on which route you want to go with those. So really talk to an accountant or a lawyer on those specifics. Most states you're going to find an LLC is more behooving for the case of aircraft. In Florida, they recently made some changes in liability and taxes. And so Incorp, when I was getting my last business, Flying Proof Incorporated, I was actually guided to go the Incorp route. So what are the pros to getting an LLC or an incorporated? Well, there's a liability side to it, taxes, and also for the professional pilot. So let me go a little more in detail. So on the liability side, let's say you're flying along and you decide you need to bail out of your aircraft. You successfully bail out, parachute to the ground, nobody's hurt, but your airplane goes right into a cornfield and now the farmer wants to sue. Well, instead of them suing Renee Brilhante, they would be suing, if my aircraft was registered under Flying Proof, they would be suing Flying Proof. So it depends on what your entities are. If the only thing Flying Proof had was this airplane, then I don't have much to give up in a lawsuit. Where if it's my name, it has everything to give up. Now, I'm going to bounce into a con here. Depending on your state rules, and depending on LLC or incorporated, and depending on actually what happens, in a lot of cases in today's society, you're actually going to find if you are the sole owner of that company, it's not really going to give you any liability protection to be an Incorp or an LLC, because they're going to go to the owner of that company, which is me or you or any of that. So actually your liability side of things, where a lot of people go towards, isn't always a protecting factor, but there are still a few cases, and depending on state rules, it may still be a benefit for you to have an Incorp or LLC for liability's sake. So let's talk about taxes. So a pro to having an Incorp or an LLC for your taxes is you can actually write off some of your business expenses with the aircraft. So if the aircraft is under an Incorp or an LLC, or you have an Incorp or an LLC, some expenses you could write off as business expenses. This is considered a nonprofit organization that you've created, you founded, then you can also have additional tax breaks as a nonprofit, along with a number of other things that could give you tax breaks as well. And that's where an accountant very knowledgeable with aircraft and in your state is very useful. All right, fellow professional pilots out there, let's have a little discussion on an additional pro that an Incorp or an LLC has. All right, so I'm an airline pilot, so I'm not allowed to do any other side flying unless it's approved. So I got additional side flying approved. It'd be the aerobatics, doing upset and loss of control recovery instruction, because that's an area of deficiency in our professional pilots. So it was welcomed. However, nothing was in written of that approval. Most cases you're going to find this is just a verbal, we're cool with it, we're happy you're doing it, and you move on. So then you wonder in the back of your mind, if something is to happen or were to happen, am I actually covered, or is the company going to come back and say, oh, look at her, she's doing all this side flying and that's dangerous and everything, all the fault's on her. So an additional way of protecting you as a professional pilot, beyond just getting approval with your company, is have your paychecks of that additional flying go to your Incorp. All right, so let's talk about the cons to having an Incorp or an LLC and your airplane being under that Incorp and LLC. So if your airplane is under an incorporate LLC, you have to do a lot of additional paperwork along with additional costs as well for having that business. So all businesses, they have to have some kind of annual report of some sort, which could also mean an annual fee as well. Sometimes it's just $25 a year, it's not a big deal. Also though, you're gonna have to file if your incorporate LLC meet the requirements to have to pay taxes. And if they do meet the requirements to pay taxes with the state that you have your incorporate LLC under, you're gonna have to pay to file your taxes and whatever means that you plan to do that. So that means additional paperwork and additional money with that. So where it became a turning point for me is with my aircraft, I have my name under it. Let's say this aircraft was registered under Flying Proof Incorporated. In order for me to fly it, Flying Proof Incorporated has to rent or lease the aircraft to me. A lot of people just do this as one big statement that says, okay, there's a lease agreement for this person to fly Flying Proof Incorporated's aircraft, ... But whenever I would use that aircraft or anyone else use that aircraft, there has to be some kind of paperwork trail of all the flights that you've done. How much was I paying? Either was it like a monthly, a lease type of thing? Was I paying by hour? And you have to manage that. And so when it comes to taxes, all the income made from that is taxable. Depends on the state. Maybe some states that's not the case, but for Flying Proof Incorporated, where it was registered at, that was the case. So this is where I learned this from talking to an AOPA, lawyer and accountant, to get that information from. Now, if you are going to be making money with the aircraft, you have to have the aircraft under a business of some sort because you're making money. If you're not going to be making money, there is this hybrid option. You could actually have the airplane registered under your name and then just have an incorporate LLC separate. It's not going to give you any liability protection, but it can reduce some of your taxes and you can get work-related expenses still by doing this kind of, I'm calling it a hybrid fashion. And that's actually the route that I chose because that was the best route for my current use of the airplane in the state that my company was under and where I was going to be living. It was just the best mix of them all for me. But down the road, if I start doing air shows in this aircraft, I'm going to have to sell the aircraft to the incorporate, the LLC, so you're having to redo your sales tax and stuff like that as well. So something to think about for your short-term, long-term, and where is it beneficial. For me, long-term additional paperwork and taxes required on having this aircraft under a incorporate LLC did not outweigh me paying sales tax again years down the road if I choose to have this aircraft be a money-making airplane.
You've decided you want to make a business, be an LLC, incorporate, partnership, or any of these other options. Now let's go through the step-by-step process on making that business. You have to go to your own state website. So I'm doing Florida's Department of State, and it's through sunbiz.org. So generally, I'm going to encourage people to look for the .gov sites because when you Google in there, let me start a corporation for Virginia, you're going to get a whole list of all of these sites that they want you to pay for this service for them to file it for you, where oftentimes you can actually do it at a very low cost. However, I will add, the first time I did it on my own, and I realized I did some of the paperwork wrong and I had to have an accountant go back and kind of fix some of it. So I do encourage to go to an accountant and or a lawyer and kind of get some ideas of how to file it and maybe even have an accountant file it for you. I do know a few people who have used some of the general sites that provide those services and they were all very pleased. So far, anyone who seeks professional assistance, I haven't met anyone who is not pleased with that. So once again, going here with sunbiz.org, this is going to be for Florida. So right here you have it nice and simple. Start a business. And it gives you right on clicking that a step-by-step process. Now something I didn't mention, if you actually highlight here, you have a few different options you can click on. You can have available resources, which I'll click on that here. So available resources, it's got all sorts of good stuff. So it's got tax information, registration information, more tax information, choosing location. This is somewhere where any question you have, you can start here and kind of start digging through more detail on what your question might be. Some of these other items here, I'm actually going to go ahead and just click on the Start a Business because those links will drive you to those. So research starting a business. Getting started with a Florida business, guess what? It brings you right back to that link we were just looking at with available resources. All right, so identify your type of business. So to decide on a corporate structure. There's a couple of really good things here. The first and foremost part is I like Florida how they break this down because they explain what each of these different types of business entities and structures are. Now, most people will actually create an LLC or a limited liability company. In a lot of states, that's what you want. That gives you your tax and your liability concerns. However, you'll find in a lot of recent changes that you're not going to quite get those tax or liabilities. When I went to go and create Flying Proof, see, it's an incorporated. The reason I chose incorporated is because I went to an accountant and he explained to me that actually, no matter what, I'm not going to get the liability, but some recent changes happened in Florida that put a corporation as the most suitable for my personal needs. That's why I encourage going to an accountant. They're going to have the recent information that's better than the tribal knowledge of sitting at an airport and saying, hey, which route should I go? When you're talking to somebody who might have formed something 10 years ago and the rules have changed. Now let's move on to step 3, form your business. I like how Florida makes everything very simple with these steps. Florida also breaks it down so you can choose right now your profit or your nonprofit. Some states, for example, Virginia, you have to actually apply for just a standard business, and then from there you can do additional paperwork to make yourself nonprofit. So let's say, all right, yeah, I do plan to make money at some point, or maybe I want that option available to me. So we click profit. Between these two, that's totally debatable to you. Nonprofit is, as it says, you're not making a profit off of it. You do get a good amount of tax exemptions in most states, so if you're really planning for this to be a club and there's a low chance that you're just going to randomly rent this out to anybody and make money off of it, then you definitely can go the nonprofit. You're going to find that either of these links that I go to, it's almost the same exact step-by-step process, so you're not missing out anything if you're choosing a nonprofit, and I'm showing you the profit. So right here, you can review the instructions for filing an article of incorporation, and that also is your LLCs, your partnerships, etc., etc. So this is important to go through the step-by-step before you click on the link because you want to make sure you have everything available and on hand before you just start filling out the paperwork. Now I'm going to talk about this corporate name. You can actually search by name and see if your name comes up with anything else. So you can go, okay, what am I thinking about? I'm thinking of Flying Proof. And you can search now. Well, it looks like there's already one, and that's me. It then also comes up with any other items here. So if there's already a corporate name on here, you had to pick something else. Now here are some other items that you need to have before you start filling out the application. So principal place of business or address, you need to pick a street address. If you don't want to use you or one of your other partnerships' addresses or personal address, you can consider going to somewhere that creates their own physical address, such as UPS will actually offer this at a few of their sites to have their own street address. You might consider using that. Now, that does take some money out of the bank account. You do have to apply for it, you do have to pay for it. Mailing address. All right, so you have to pick a mailing address. Something that most people wonder is on these addresses, does it need to be with the state? For example, let's say you live in Virginia in the Chesapeake area and you're very close to North Carolina, and you might have some corporate people who are members of your partnership that are in Carolina and they want to use one of theirs and you're filing for Virginia. You can pick any state to run a business. You can choose any state out there, whether you live there or not. You just have to have somebody who, what they call as a registered agent, which we'll get to. So you could actually put these addresses as anywhere, any state, and that's completely fine. So don't worry about if it's not within the state. Now, what needs to be within the state is your registered agent. Whether that's you personally, one of the other partnerships, or if you guys don't live in that state and you chose a lot of people like Delaware or Nevada, for example, to create LLCs, if you choose one of those, you need to have some kind of registered agent name and address that actually is there in that state. Now, it's possible there may be some other rules in different states, but that is the case for Florida and a number of other states that I've gone through. So who can this be? A lot of times if you do pick an accountant, the accountant will actually take that registered agent's role. All right, now you got to think about what is the corporate purpose. This can be kind of a confusing one and a concern for a lot of people with LLCs and incorporated. What I would recommend is going to that AOPA, contacting the lawyer, contacting the accountant side. They actually have one gentleman who does both, and run through this idea with them and see what kind of pointers they may have. So, any and all officers must be listed here. Now, if there's just the one person, that's fine, but if you have multiple, then you must list who they are. All right, effective date. So, under the notes here, it will talk about filing and doing your annual report. The annual report, you do have to generally pay for it. It's not too bad though. And the annual report for Florida, it's a quick form that you just fill out. You go into the SunBiz website and you follow the links for doing your annual report. Honestly, it took me maybe 5 minutes to complete. So it's not a very difficult thing. So if you're sitting here and you're trying to skip out on doing it, really the only true benefit I see, I would say maybe you're saving a couple of pennies for not. So if you don't want to file online for whatever reason, you can print out and mail it as well. And there's the steps for that. And these are some Q&As, questions and answers, that you definitely can go through. All right, so with Florida right here, you have this link. So if you want to go online, you can go ahead and click the link. And this link is going to make you go, okay, you can choose to file. This will be a new, or if you want to correct an existing, you can go ahead and do that, and then you'll start a new filing. I'm not going to go through and fill this out, but I'm going to just scroll through some of the portions here. So your filing information, okay, your certificate of status, your certified copy. You see there is a cost for each of these. That is very common for states. This is the name that you want to try. I also do recommend not only looking through that search name, because there was a name I originally wanted and ended up getting denied because it sounded too similar to other ones. So it wouldn't hurt to go onto Google and start looking up different names out there that are not just in your state but in other areas as well. Here you go. Here's your addresses to put in there. And purpose. Everything that you kind of saw in step to step, make sure you have this information available to you. You're seeing that all here in a form. You can continue and go on. Now it's not going to let me continue because I didn't put anything in there. How to request an EIN, Employee Identification Number. Whether or not you plan to have employees, this is something you'll have to file and apply for taxes, along with something you'll have to apply for to get most bank accounts. So you go to the irs.gov website. Here it is, the general portion. Under File, you'll click for Business and Self-Employed. Once you get to tax information for your business, employer ID number. So you're going to have some question and answers here, and then you have a link down at the bottom here which will apply for EIN online. So you can go ahead and you can click on the Apply. It'll give you some requirements in order to be eligible, statement of understanding, and then you can just go ahead and click on Apply Online now, and you can go through the step-by-step process.
All right, let's talk about professional advice. So you can always just do all this yourself. You can fill out all the paperwork yourself. I started by doing that. Me personally, just not having a great background experience in all these, even though I talked to a number of people and friends that have incorporated LLCs and have their airplanes listed under them and don't, and got a lot of personal advice, I really had to get state specific and me specific advice. So AOPA, Airplane Owners and Pilots Association, they have free legal and accounting advice. I say free, you have to be a member. They do have one gentleman who's both an accountant and lawyer, so that's pretty cool. That's a one-stop shop. I highly recommend them. They're great, even if you're not even going to put your aircraft under an Inc. or LLC. They're a great last stop or one of the first stops, however order you want to do it, but call them up before you buy an airplane, bounce some ideas off with them. And if they don't know the answer right there, then they will look it up for you and get back to you. You can also, and I do recommend getting some state-specific advice, and that's with accountants and with lawyers, because everything does vary state to state. They have to take exams specific to their state. So there you go, it's different. Not a bad idea to seek legal and seek accounting advice as well, at least for the startup. process. And then you can learn how to just do the regular taxes and all of that yourself. That's not as bad, but the startup is really helpful, and maybe even the first set of taxes or two.
Although resources out there are endless, here's a couple of contacts I recommend getting a hold of. AOPA, which is the Airplane Owners and Pilots Association, their standard membership will give you a lot of good advice, and I always recommend before, as someone's purchasing an airplane, to give this number a call. If you need additional legal advice, you'll either pay an hourly rate or you can just choose to pay for another $35 a year and you get the membership Pilot Protection Services Plus, which is a better deal than paying the lawyer hourly rate. If you don't already have this, just give them a call, see if you can get help under your current membership. Most cases you'll find that. My particular case, I needed a little extra time and question and answers with the lawyer, so I ended up paying for the additional membership for that. This phone number here is the general number, so when you call, you'll get prompted to get further in depth to where you need to be communicating with, and you may get forwarded kind of to a secretary. Can't think of any better way of putting that, but they will put your name in the hat on the callback list and they'll get back to you. A few of the people there who are very knowledgeable, especially both accountant and lawyers, they're always on the phone and they're always answering questions, so it may be a little bit of a wait, but they'll definitely get back to you within a day or so. I would also recommend calling the EAA, Experimental Aircraft Association, especially if you're dealing with a experimental specific type question. Or when you're talking with Incorps and LLCs, there's definitely a difference, especially in the money-making world. For example, if you have an experimental, you can only give instructions to pilots who are going to be purchasing a like aircraft. And here's their phone number. Also, contact any accountant or lawyer in your state. What I did is I looked at my most financially responsible buddy in the local area and I asked him who their accountant was. Also, a good idea is whenever you find an accountant and lawyer is to get ones that are knowledgeable in the aviation industry. So just asking any of them, they might be great at their field, but when they're dealing with aircraft specific items, you really want to get either an aviation lawyer or an accountant who has a lot of clients that are in aviation or have airplanes. Not hard to find pilots that are also accountant and lawyers by just hanging out in the airport. I can actually think of a few just off the top of my head. And if you hang out in an airport regularly, you probably also know an accountant and or a lawyer sitting at the airport as well.
From Flying Proof Incorporated, where we do mentor, fly, and work, we want to thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions or comments, please put that down in the comments box below and we'll get to it as soon as possible. Well, until the next video, everyone, keep flying, hopefully inverted. Bye.